link and go in there as you're going along. I did not remove Alexandra, so I'm not sure what happened there. So hi.
She just froze and I lost sound. Oh, now you're back.
Oh, okay. Am I back now? Am I good?
Yes.
Okay.
You're good now.
Okay, good. It was about the time I was starting to talk about myself, so it probably wasn't all that important. So my name is Chris Barthold. I'm a faculty member at Mason in the special ed department. I coordinate the applied behavior analysis program. I've been working with people across the lifespan in all different life situations, people with disabilities, without disabilities, for about 25 years. I've had lots of different experiences. I will tell some stories. I do, to protect the confidentiality and privacy of people. There may be some things that are changed just to protect the innocent, as they used to say. But the general gist will be true. If you have any questions, concerns, something doesn't sound right to you, you're not sure about something, please just either put it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Either way works. And because we have such a small group, I think we can make this, interactive. We don't have to wait until the end for questions. That being said, once I turn on my presentation, I can't see any questions or anything like that. So if I could put Stacy or Anita in charge of just monitoring the chat box.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about problem behavior, assessing problem behavior, how we intervene, and it's going to be a really kind of surface overview. So I'm going to give you some general ideas, but if you find that you need someone a bit more professional to help you out, I'll also talk about what to look for in a person who, if you decide to hire a behavior specialist or a behavior analyst to come in. So I'll kind of juxtapose those things as I go along. All right, so I have to share my screen. Present now. And I will present. Oops. Select entire screen. All right. Hopefully you all can see, oops, no, I didn't want that. Hopefully you all can see my presentation here. Let me know if you're having any problems with that. And again, stop me if you've either heard this one before or you have questions. So first of all, we always like to start off with, you're going to hear some things about reinforcing problem behavior and kind of how we change the environment and things like that. And one of the things that I get a lot from clients, if I don't address it directly, is that must make me a bad parent, or, oh gosh, I screwed up, or I can't believe that I messed up my kid. And none of those things are true. So we all get in situations where we are maybe attending to the wrong things, or there are mistakes that are made or whatever. And I'm never there to judge. And if you are hiring someone to work with your family, you want that too. You don't want, and I would say that the people that I work with and the people that I train, just about all of them will say that, I'm not there to judge. I'm there to figure out what's going on and give you tools to keep the peace a little bit more. And then sometimes when you see, like, we'll be taking data and things like that, you'll think, oh, they must be, looking at that spot on the countertop and think that, I don't clean or something. Honestly, I don't see that stuff. People point it out to me. I'm like, it's there? Really? I'm here to watch, your interactions with your children, and give you some suggestions. I don't even notice most of that stuff. So just keep in mind that, we come from this idea of we're all doing the best we can. And here I am, a second set of eyes that might help you keep the peace a little bit better. All right, so next slide. So we know some things about problem behavior. We know that out of all the things that people are worried about, it's problem behavior. What is problem behavior? It could be aggression. It could be talking back. It could be not cooperating with school assignments. It could be disruption. It could be any of those types of things. It could be, in some very rare and severe cases, self-injury. And we know that out of all the things that cause parental stress, it's problem behavior. And I feel like almost like we should publish that in the journal, because of course, like problem behavior is a source of parental stress. We know that problem behavior can reduce learning time. And oh boy, do we not know that right now with COVID and the online learning and trying to get our kids used to online learning and all that kind of stuff. I would assume that a lot of you are spending more time redirecting problem behavior more than anything else. Well, I'm not talking to people who necessarily have family members with ASD or have ASD themselves. We do know that it's very prevalent with people with ASD and people maybe with lower IQs. And we're going to talk especially about why communication and language is such a risk factor for problem behavior. It's probably the biggest risk factor of all. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about how that fits in. So if you can, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, it's really important that if you see problem behavior that you address it early. Don't wait and say, oh, they'll just grow out of it. Because what happens is that it starts to multiply over time. So the longer we practice a behavior, the better we get at it. And that includes problem behavior. So what happens is that we see that problem behavior getting better and better and better, and maybe some of those skills not so much. So it's really, if you can catch it early, it's better to catch it early than have a wait and see attitude. And so what I'm going to give you is the idea of how positive behavior supports and applied behavior analysis can help you identify those problems and intervene as quickly as possible. So this is kind of where I'm coming from, that behavior has to happen in some sort of context, that the things that we do happen in context. So what happens before, what triggers a behavior is important, as well as what happens after, or that reinforcer. And if you want to learn more about reinforcement, there is a presentation that I gave not too long ago that is on the website that you can take a look at. So what happened before the behavior, what might be triggering it, and what happens after, what might be reinforcing it, are super important. But there's also these other things, and these things kind of go in that circle there. And you'll hear different words like motivating operations, abolishing operations, but I like the term setting events because I think it kind of gives you a better idea here of what's going on. It's the setting. It's the things that kind of set the occasion for that behavior to occur. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about things like woke up late, things like are late on medication, things like being hungry, things like, I had, a bad day with my boss and I come home and, I'm snapping at somebody. Those are setting events. Those are the things that can kind of trigger behavior and reinforcement. And so, sometimes what happened before the day occurred, before that immediate environment, does have an effect. And sometimes we're, as behavior analysts, accused of not necessarily keeping an eye on that stuff. So if you are deciding to go with a behavior analyst, you're going to want to say, how do you assess this behavior? How do you make sure you get a holistic picture? So basically, why do kids do what they do? And behavior analysts don't consider behavior just inappropriate behavior. We consider everything that you do behavior. What I'm doing right now is behavior. What you're doing right now is behavior. What my husband's doing upstairs washing dishes is behavior. And everything we do is context dependent. And there are 4 typical categories that these, what happens before and what happens after kind of fall into. And the first one is doing it, sometimes we call it attention seeking, where, you do something to get a reaction from somebody else. And sometimes that attention is positive and sometimes that attention is negative. We all know the saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So, sometimes even, reprimanding a child, if the behavior is serving the function or serving the reason of attention, then reprimanding your child at that point in time actually might serve to make it happen more often. And we'll talk about how to figure that out in just a second. Access to tangible items. And the best way to remember access to tangible items is the classic candy in the checkout lane at the grocery store, where, they put that stuff there very strategically, don't they? You're walking through the grocery store. I want M&Ms. No, you can't have M&Ms. And then what happens? The meltdown. And then I always say, then all the lights in the store go off except for the one right on top of you. and, or it feels that way, doesn't it? It feels like everybody's just turned around to stare, right? And sometimes we say, okay, you can have the M&Ms, but that actually would reinforce that problem behavior. But you can understand, you kind of want to make it stop. And then another reason why kids might do what they do, and also this applies to adults too, and it also applies to us as parents and family members and siblings and all the type of roles that we play. Sometimes people will do stuff to get out of, not have to do it all, or procrastinate. And that's what we call escape or avoidance. So if you think about escape or avoidance, it's getting out of something, is not even going to something, or it's procrastinating. So to recap, why do people do what they do? Their main categories are to get attention, to get an item, or to get out of something. And then there's a 4th category that I'll talk about in just a second, and that is sometimes called sensory, but I think that's kind of mislabeled. What it means is that there's something going on inside the body that's the cause. Whether that's an endorphin rush or that's some sort of imbalance, or what would fall under there is I had a child while back that had really bad self-injury on their face. They were picking at their face. And it turned out that they had a massive cavity and needed a root canal and all kinds of endodontic work. And that would be considered an internal cause or a sensory cause, or sometimes it's called automatic. So basically, get attention, get items, get out of something, or there's something going on inside. So why is it that people with communication issues tend to have more problem behavior? Well, basically because we often use problem behavior to communicate the things that we don't have words to say. So if you think about the last time you got really, really, really angry, and I won't ask anybody to raise hands or anything like that, almost like I could punch a wall right now, or maybe you did. Um, were you super articulate at that time? Could you say, "And I'm angry, and let me use my words and tell you exactly how I feel and exactly what," or was it more like, and I'm gonna cuss it. So we all get to that point where, and if you don't have a reliable communication system in general, then there's probably a lot of things that you're trying to communicate, like I want attention, or I want that M&M, or get me out of here, this is awful, or I have a toothache, that you can't communicate to people. So a lot of times that interaction can look like problem behavior, maybe hitting or swiping, or even to the point of biting or things like that, because those individuals have something to tell you and they don't have the means to do that. And also, you want to be careful of falling into the trap of, um, this intervention's for biting, this intervention's for hitting, this intervention's for property disruption, because it's not so important as to what the behavior looks like. It's more important as to why it's being done. So you want to look and you want to find out why something is happening. Now, a good behavior analyst is going to look at all this stuff. So they should be looking at things like sleep patterns, eating patterns, what skills the individual brings to the table, because that's helpful. What type of ways do they communicate? Are there any medical issues that might need to be taken care of? We always say when we teach our students, rule out medical first and then do your assessment. And the reason is that, if it's somebody who has an infection and, an antibiotic can take care of it, then that's a whole lot easier than putting together this elaborate plan. Okay, so how do we figure this stuff out? And what I did was gave you some ideas of ways that you can look for patterns yourself. And the best way to do it is actually with the ABC data collection sheet. And I'm going to show you a filled out one first here. So it gives you a general idea of how to do this. So the first thing is that we write down exactly what that behavior looks like, because I can tell you that two different people can look at a behavior and interpret it way differently. I don't know if I told this story. I think I did in another seminar that I gave, but I went in to talk to a preschool teacher, and they had brought me in. It was just your typical preschool. They said, I want you to take a look at this kid. He keeps using inappropriate language. Great. Okay. So, I'm going in, I watch for an hour. I don't see a thing, not a thing. And I'm like, well, okay. And the teacher comes over and says, did you get all that? Nope, I didn't. Well, our definition of inappropriate language was very different. I was waiting for, if you remember the Christmas story, the mother of all words, right? And she was looking at it like, I'm going to hit you, you poopy head. It was inappropriate language. I was like, oh, that's not inappropriate to me, but that was the behavior of concern. So what do you learn? You learn that, before you go in to observe inappropriate language, you say, what does that look like to you? And write that down. When you write things down, you're going to write the date and the time in case they're, let's say, these all look like they're happening right around 9:30 to 10 o'clock a.m. And maybe there's something going on between 9:30 and 10 o'clock a.m. Maybe George needs to use the bathroom, or maybe that's time for right afterwards, or is time for George's insulin, or any of those types of things. Maybe, George woke up at 8:30 and this is the beginning of the day. So looking for time patterns is very important. What's also important is looking at these antecedent behavior consequence relationships. Now, I don't like the terms antecedent behavior and consequence because I think they're a little too technical. What I prefer is what happened before, what did they do, and what happened after. And the best thing to do if you're going to write these things down, the less interpretation in the moment, the better. Just write down what happened before, what did they do, and what happened afterwards, and then look later for patterns. It's also really important if you're going to use something like this to do it as quickly after the behavior happens as possible. Now, I understand that right after doesn't always happen, but if you wait till the end of the day, you're going to forget a lot of stuff. Or a lot of things have happened between 9:50 a.m. and 9:50 p.m., and they can influence what you write down. So you want to make sure that you're doing it as quickly as possible. I put let's see here. I put a blank version of the checklist in there, so you can, or of the data sheet in there. So if you want to use it, it's right there for you. And then back here, I'm going to show you another one. Let's say that you're like, I don't want to write all this stuff down. You can also put together a checklist. And checklists can come in any different form. This is one that I found off the internet that you can just check off which one of these things what happened before, which one of these things happened during. You can adjust it to your needs, what happened after. I have one that I use that's maybe about index card size that you can print out. You can put them on index cards and then just fill them out as you go along. I can send that along too. This one is similar to that. It's very busy. So I'm actually just gonna, so it's not, because really all this stuff over here is just a, go over here, it's just a repeat of what that other one is. And it's just a bunch of those all on one page. So you can use those checklists, you just check them off as you go along. And then you just look for patterns, what looks like attention, being reprimanded it might be attention. Coming over and comforting might be attention. What might look like tangibles. It could be that, I give them something after the behavior occurs to calm them down, and that's actually reinforcing the problem behavior. It could be that, I kind of let them out of a task, and that's what's reinforcing problem behavior. Again, these aren't judgments. This is what's happening now, and so we know we need to make changes to make things better. So this is never a judgment about what you're doing now. But these are some ways that you can look at them. Did I see? Yeah, did I hear a question?
Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if I could ask a question about this. So my son had an FBA a few months ago, and we, the IEP team got together to review the results of the data collection, which was what I was expecting to see, what you just showed, something like that. But it was really anecdotal, and it was like, he kind of noodles, in transition from the playground, and they gave me like really general, high level feedback.
Okay.
Is that what a parent should expect, or should a parent expect to see when you're doing that? And like after the data collection, should we expect to see like a spreadsheet like you just showed?
If you're working with it, so I'm going to kind of say that there's a difference between kind of a school FBA and a BCBA FBA. There is a difference between those two. If you're having an FBA by a BCBA, you should be expecting what I'm showing you here, which is graphs and charts and whatnot. And, I actually show the graphs and charts to the parents and say, what do you think? That's just the way I do it. And then we work together to put together the plan. In schools, it works a little bit differently because they sometimes use different tools. So they might use, for example, like a survey form or something to that effect, where they score the survey form. It is better to have direct observation and have data collection, but those survey forms can also work well too. If you see that behavior plan really isn't working, then it might be time to take that in vivo data, like what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does. And unfortunately, we didn't really have much time to see if it was working.
Yeah.
But okay, thank you.
Sure. Let's see here. So you took those data and you found all this stuff out. So let me go back to my presentation. Now what? So the next thing that I'm going to do, I don't know why that little horn is there in the middle, is that I'm going to put together a behavior plan. And like I said, the way that I do it, not everybody does it this way, but this is the way I've done it over the years, is that I like to just say, here are the data that I've collected, here are the graphs, what do you think? And then have people really talk about the solutions that they would use. And then, I can guide it. And, if there's something that maybe isn't quite as effective in my experience, I can guide, to things that are more effective. But I find that, if people come up with the plan together, that it's probably going to be way more effective than if I say, here's your plan, do it. And that, I'm sure that makes sense to all of you, because I'm sure you've all been in situations where someone said, okay, here's the checklist of things you have to do this week. You're like, okay, well, can we negotiate? So that's how I do it. What am I looking for? What am I trying to do? I am trying to make sure that whatever problem behavior this individual is engaging in, that they now have some sort of alternative that makes that problem behavior way less attractive. So, if I have someone who doesn't have a good communication system to ask for attention, I'm going to put that in there. Or if I have, an individual who doesn't have a good way to say, hey, I like this toy, I'm going to give them that, that type of communication. Or if the individual doesn't have a way to say, you know what, I hate this, please make it stop, I'm going to give them a way to say that rather than engaging in problem behavior. A good behavior plan, and again, this is one that would be written by BCBA, should be implemented by everybody who's in the person's life. Because it's not enough to have one person doing the plan. If let's say you were in a situation and only one person ever listened to you and nobody else did, that's not going to be very, very helpful for you. So you want to put together stuff that everybody can do. That's, I use the KISS method, keep it short and simple. I know there's other ways to say it. The simpler, the better. And simple ideas to help people live better lives. And behavior support doesn't work well like in a counselor's office. It really has to be done in the environment that the individual is living. So as such, if you hire a BCBA, they're going to come to you. They're going to want to come to your house. They're going to want to see what the environment looks like, see how you can make tweaks to the environment. Most behavior plans are not written in a clinician's office. There are some, but for the most part, they're usually, we come to you. So you can expect that. And again, we're not trying to judge your home life or anything. We're not going to tell you, repaint your walls or anything like that. We're really looking to provide those supports to keep the peace in the house. Okay, so what are we looking for? So we figured out what the reasons are. We figured out what typically happens before, specific events, specific things. We figured out what the individual does. Now, and we've figured out what happened afterwards. So what are we going to do? Well, we can change what happens before so that you don't have to engage in the problem behavior. And we can change what the individual does, or what we call a competing response or a replacement behavior. All of those terms, all that jargon is the same thing. What we're doing is that we're teaching them a more appropriate way to access that same thing that happened afterward, because that's the most important thing. It has to access the same thing that happened afterward. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So let me give you some examples of what I mean here. Okay, so let's say that it is access to tangible items. So it's that grocery store example. So let's say that I will, take your hand, pull you to the M&Ms, or say, I want M&Ms, or whatever it is. It said no, or said, okay, it's time to stop. You have a little bit of that transition. It's time to stop, watching Bubble Guppies, and we're going to go take a bath now. And let's say that triggers a meltdown. And afterwards, like, all right, you can watch for 5 more minutes, but then we have to go, we absolutely have to go get that bath. That might be reinforcing that meltdown. So what might I do? I might use the visual schedules that we talked about last time. Like I might use timers. So, before the meltdown, I might say, okay, you can watch Bubble Guppies, but I'm setting a visual timer for 30 minutes. When the timer goes off, we have to go take a bath. If I have someone who does not know how to ask appropriately, that's going to be the first thing that I teach. Okay, so if I have someone who can't ask me appropriately, that's first off. And after that, I might teach individuals how to wait. So I'm going to teach that communication response first, reinforce it, but that doesn't last forever. Once they have it, then I'm going to teach waiting in small increments. And I mean super small for some kids. Like sometimes I'll say, okay, but you got to wait 10 seconds. And, that's the stamina they have right at that moment. So I'm able to use 10 seconds, and then I'm able to go to 20 and then 30 and then waiting up to 10 minutes. Let's talk about getting out of delaying or avoiding. So let's say I say it's time to go work, or it's time to get a bath, or anything that seems like work, even if it doesn't seem like work to us, can be work to somebody else. Take out the trash, a transition from one place to the next, a more preferred activity to a less preferred activity. Those can all be things that are that can be triggers for problem behavior. And so I'm actually going to give an example of, I'm going to call her Gina. And Gina worked at a work site with me. It was the back of a Kmart. So Kmart is mostly out of business now, but if you remember Kmart back in the day, maybe Walmart, the back rooms where, they take their merchandise out and they put it on racks and things like that, it's not the most pleasant place to be. It's pretty dirty. It can be loud. Sometimes it can be smelly. It's not always air conditioned. And so Gina, pretty much as soon as we got there, she would literally trash the back room of the Kmart. So she'd be pulling stuff down, she'd be pulling things off racks, merchandise got ripped, boxes got ripped. We were actually almost asked not to come back. And what happened is that everybody ended up not doing anything in the group because of Gina's problem behavior. So what we did was first, now she had a full communication repertoire, but she had a hard time telling us that, she really didn't like this job and she needed a break. So what I did is I put together some break cards. And at first, those break cards, we were there for 90 minutes and each one was 10 minutes and she got 9. And it's like, well, she's not working at all. Yes, it's true. But I have 4 other students who are, and they weren't before this. So I got her going. We had the 90 minutes. Okay. Yeah, you've been doing great. We've had about 5 days. You haven't had a problem. Okay, now I'm going to take away one of those break cards. You have to work for 10 minutes at some point during this. No problem. 10 minutes break. We faded it down so that in 90 minutes, she took 1 break within 90 minutes. But if we had started with, you have to work for 90 minutes, it never would have happened. It's just like training for a marathon. If I said to you, hey, I think you can run a marathon, let's do 26.2. So, are you crazy? I've never even ran around a block. But if I said, hey, I think we can train you for a marathon in a year, let's start with running around the block, you might be more willing to do that. So I'm going to teach requesting, and I'm going to be teaching small response requirements and increasing over time. I might use a visual schedule to say, these are the things that you have to do. I may take the tasks and break them down into their component parts so that they know exactly what they're going to do and exactly when they're finished. I might use a token system. I might change the task completely. And, if I can do it in a way that is still, it still gets the job done, but maybe it's in a different type of, environment or situation. Like, let's say I found out it was too hot and that's why I was getting those meltdowns. I said, well, okay, can she work the floor then where it's air conditioned? I might do something like that. Or I might sometimes just giving people the choice is enough to delay the problem behavior or stop the problem behavior. Do you want to use the pink towel or the green towel? Those might be helpful ways to take care of problem behavior. Scheduled breaks. Again, I talked about those break cards. Giving those scheduled breaks no matter what. And I may have to build stamina. So it may be a stamina issue that I have to build up. And if I try to start at the top, I'm never going to get there. But if I start at the bottom and work my way up, I will. Okay, and then attention. So I've got 2 more slides after this. Attention, like we said, you turn your back for a second. Every time I'm doing something else, I'm cooking dinner, I've got to dust the house, I'm doing laundry, I'm vacuuming, something happens. I attend to a sibling and, the problem behavior happens. So let's say, it throws something and I tend to say, hey, don't do that. And I figured out that maybe that, hey, don't do that is just enough attention to reinforce that behavior. The first thing that I'm going to do is then I'm going to have them learn to ask appropriately for attention. And I'm going to give that attention. So I'm going to drop what I'm doing if I can, or I'm going to divide my attention somehow. That doesn't last forever. So we'll do that for a little bit until they've got it. And then we'll say, okay, you know what? I'm going to set the timer for a couple of minutes and I'll come back and talk to you then, and gradually increase the time until they're waiting for a good amount of time, able to kind of engage in appropriate behavior for a longer amount of time. What are some things I could do to prevent this issue? So I could, again, use that visual schedule, say that, okay, I'm going to be washing the dishes and you're expected to, watch TV for that amount of time. Excuse me. Giving attention before leaving. So giving that pre-attention is sometimes very helpful. So, you'll play for a little bit and then you go, I got to go get the laundry out of the washer and put it in the dryer. Those types of things can help a lot. Token boards. We talked about tokens in another seminar. Timers are your best friend. Timers are good because now I can see with a visual timer, when are you coming back? Oh, you're coming back in 5 minutes. Okay, I'm good. And then also before you leave, and this sounds so simple, but it's something that people often forget to do, and it's really easy to forget, is maybe get your child involved in an activity they can do by themselves before you leave. So before you go and get the laundry out of the washer, maybe say, hey, here's a book for you to read, so that they have something to do to distract themselves while you're doing what you need to do. And you can use these in combination. All of these can be used in combination. And then this internal thing. So, if you don't see a pattern, if it's happening all the time, and, the first thing is don't necessarily assume internal feelings. If you see this and you're like, I see you took the data and you're, doing this and, you're saying, I don't see a pattern. I don't see a pattern in time of day. I don't see what's going on. That's when you would call maybe someone like me, where I have some more sophisticated tools that I can bring in to observe. There is a free app called Count with 2 E's at the end, where you can set up some of these data sheets if you're an app person. And then you can actually download them to Excel if you're a data geek. But I might have some more tools like that I can come in. I can do some more higher level observations and maybe make sense of some things based on my experience kind of dealing with these data. So, if you're coming up with, I'm not sure what's going on, give somebody like me a call. What can you do to prevent it? Well, it kind of depends upon the behavior. Let's say it's something like warm things. So, you see the problem behavior happen when, let's say, there's no blankets around. Well, okay, I got to get some blankets. Maybe there's some squishy things. You always want to rule out any medical issues. And sometimes when we're talking about things that create a rush or something like that, I might talk to an occupational therapist because they may have some tools and ideas. For example, let's say I have a client who chews on things, chews on pencils, sometimes, you'll see, what's in your mouth type of thing, or, chews on the strings of their hoodie or something like that. And I'm taking data and I'm not seeing a pattern. I might go to the OT and say, do you have a chew type of apparatus that, they could chew on instead that's, more hygienic and, more appropriate? And oftentimes they'll be more than happy to help you out with that kind of stuff. All right, so that's the end of what I have to say. Again, these things will be available to you on the website.
One question: could you repeat the name of the app?
Sure.
I think it was. Or
let me put it in here
in the chat box. Great.
Yeah, I'm gonna end my presentation here, and I'm gonna put it in the chat box. That's the name of the app. And for me, being a data nerd, I love it. But I know not everybody's a data nerd. Did I hear a question?
I'm sorry, I didn't see where you put the app. Maybe I don't have the right way in here how I'm looking at this.
Can you see the chat?
Yes.
At the end, I wrote something. It should say my name, and then underneath it is the name of the app.
Okay, let's see. Oh my goodness, I don't see it at all. I see it in here. What's it? Can you please, Christine Brad? Is that county?
County.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that is the name.
I'm sorry. It's just that I was like, okay.
No, that's okay. Did I stun everybody?
So where are you located at?
I'm in Fairfax.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I have a Down syndrome and mine, it does a lot of that behavior for, it may be for calling attention. So I'm just trying to figure out why he does this, especially when he's going to do a task. Like right now we're doing OT online and speech
Mm-hmm.
online. He throws his tantrums down the ground.
Mm.
So, and it's kind of like hard. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to do it? And I said, well, maybe this is going to help me. So I'm going to go sweet talking him or whatever just to get him ready.
You can try it, yeah, or set parameters around the time. Like, listen, if you just do 5 minutes.
I'm going to do a timer. Actually, I'm going to go put the timer. That's one of the things I'm going to use for him. Maybe that will work for me or what you were mentioning.
Yeah, hopefully it will. If it doesn't, if you're still having trouble, feel free to contact me. I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Who knows? Maybe any one of those little private sections so he can come watch him out and help us out. Because there are times when I'm about to throw the towel.
Yeah, I'm happy to see if I can help.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that goes to anybody who's on the call. So
I have a question about you were mentioning how school FBAs are different than an FBA that's done by a BCBA. And
yes.
someone suggested to me that I request the school to I'm not saying this correctly, but make a request for the school to have an FBA that is completed by a BCBA. Is that something that can, I mean, we're really far from Fairfax, but have you ever heard of that happening?
Is it okay if I ask where you're from? If you don't want to answer, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I'm in Stanton, which is in Augusta County.
Okay. It's going to depend on the availability of a BCBA.
Okay.
Is the big thing. And I'm just thinking, like, in Stanton, I think there are a few, and there may be a few that work in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
But you could, and I don't know all the particulars of your situation, so please see these as general recommendations here. But I think you could possibly ask for someone who's a BCBA, or you could ask for an independent educational evaluation if you don't agree.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can, they will give you a list of people who they contract with usually, and you can or decide not to go with them.
Okay. So I can ask for that. Wait a minute. Let me just make sure I have this right. So if they perform their FBA and I'm not satisfied, then I can ask for a independent. Is that an IEE? Is that
yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All
yes.
right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. There are parameters around that as well. So, they'll probably give you a list of people that they work with and that type of thing. So.
Okay. Very well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A visual schedule who has really helped my son who has Down syndrome. That's fantastic to hear. Yeah. So, if you think about it, we all kind of crave structure, right? There's not a one of us who likes things to be completely chaotic. So the more structure we can give people, the better, right?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by the visual schedule?
Sure. I actually did I can give you kind of like the cliff notes, but I did a webinar on this about a month ago. I think it's still on the Down syndrome website. Stacy, can you confirm?
It is on the Down syndrome website, and I could send a follow-up email that will provide a link to the webpage where all the webinars that Christine has done for us are located.
That would be great.
And that way, both the PowerPoint presentation and a recording of our conversation for each webinar are there.
That would be perfect because I'm tuning in late. And I'll just tell you real quickly, I'm not a parent of a Down syndrome child, but I am a sister-in-law, and my husband and I are guardians for my sister-in-law. She is 53 years old. She doesn't have behavioral problems per se, but she has an odd behavior that we don't understand.
Okay.
And in lieu of the fact that I could be more involved with her because there will be some change in the family dynamic. So, just to keep it very brief, she visits the bathroom way more often than we all think is normal. So, when she was in a day program, she didn't really have the problem so much because she's busy and she has all these things going on. She's at home now with her mother, who's 90, 91, and her sister, who's working all day. And so maybe she's bored. But I think she's always had a little bit of a fixation on the bathroom anyway, and we're trying to rule out medical conditions, obviously.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So that's really the first step. But I have a feeling, I have a hunch that it's probably more behavioral, and it seems really odd to me that she wants to go and to the bathroom eight or so times a day, 10 times a day, and kind of hang out in there. So that's why I was kind of wondering if I could pick up anything. And I have listened and taken. You have given me some ideas.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, I believe it or not, going to the bathroom multiple times is way more common than you would think. It's something that we get referrals for a lot, and I think you're doing the right thing, ruling out any type of medical issues or gynecological issues that could be triggering that, or GI issues or anything like that. And then having somebody maybe getting her engaged in tasks, or having a box of things that she can do independently or something like that might be helpful.
Okay. I mean, I'm not physically there, but I am. I'm trying to help.
Yeah, it's harder when you're not right there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's actually one of the items in my son's FBA at school, because he's 7 years old with Down syndrome, and he would excuse himself to the restroom for about an hour at a time, and they thought it was a medical condition. I'm like, when they told me he was doing it, I'm like, oh no. Oh no, this is strictly avoidance.
Yes. Well, if you go into it's not like the teacher can really follow you into the bathroom and get you out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, people learn what is a place that they can go where people are not going to pull them out. And yeah.
So yeah, that's it's very. I had many. I had one client who just really liked the sound of the toilet flushing. And so that was the reason that, he would go into the bathroom, and it was a small problem in public bathrooms because he would try to flush every single toilet and then every single urinal. And you can imagine there are a lot in a lot of public bathrooms. So it's not unusual to see those types of things happening. I think I forgot to look at Bala's question. We have a 14-year-old son with Down syndrome. Recently, he's refusing to cut his nails, which he would do regularly while going to school. Do you have any thoughts on this? So, I would definitely take a look, maybe take a look at what's happening before, what's happening after, and see if there have been any changes, in the way maybe you're doing it that might have triggered some problem behavior, or if there was a recent time when maybe you cut it, too low or something, and he got hurt, and now he's like, I'm not doing that anymore. That sometimes happens. But I also think that there's a bit of, because we have so many of these changes with COVID, I think we also, we can't deny that. We can't deny that, there are these setting events that, our worlds have all been turned upside down, and that, things that maybe we once enjoyed, we don't enjoy anymore, or we can't do, or whatever. So it may be also that it's just one of those situations where, he's just a little out of sorts. And, something like a visual schedule might help, or, even, just having, some Zoom time with his friends or something like that, to just kind of bring some peace and order back. But yeah, I think we're all a little bit out of sorts. We're all off our game a little bit. I know I am. So, I think we do need to take that into consideration when we see these problem behaviors, especially with the kids who really can't tell us, hey, I'm off my game, or I'm not feeling well, or, this COVID thing, I don't want to be in the house for one more minute, or whatever. We really do need to keep that into consideration. I don't know if that's helpful. You're welcome. Yeah, so yes, feel free to also, if there's something you want to ask, but you don't want to ask it in front of the group, you can feel free to email me. My email's in the chat. And I'm happy to talk one-on-one with you all if you want.
Anita also put the link to the web page where all your presentations and recordings.
Oh, fantastic!
Right in the chat room. But I try and send out a follow-up email with the recording and the PowerPoint, and I'll try and include it as well.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. And Mark, all that stuff should be, Stacy's really great about including copies of slides and all that stuff in the email. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's about 4 o'clock. I'm willing to, I think I may have had one more questions. Oh, Anita did that. Thank you.
I have one more question for you.
Sure, go right ahead.
I had the problems with the nail with my son. He's improved a lot. But my question that I have is that he hasn't improved a lot yet is on his hair cutting.
Yeah.
He gets traumatized. I mean, you have a Down syndrome. I'm not sure whether it's a boy or girl and how old yours is, but I'm having issues with his hair. I had to start cutting his hair myself because like every week they say, do it every week so he can get used to this. But I'm not sure whether there's a way. He complains that it's too loud. The machine bothers the noise. They're so sensitive to noise.
Is it the clippers that he's saying are too loud? Could you?
No matter where we're taking him, and I bought one that is a little less silent. The home ones that they're softer and you can less, but he still is. I think it's the feeling that is going to his head. And
so it might be.
I'm not sure, but this is like a battle we have every week.
Yeah, and that's difficult. And again, not unusual. There's a lot of kids that either they don't like somebody that close to their head, or some people report that they feel like it's painful, or things like that. Have you tried scissors?
Yes, we did. That's what we were doing, and still, just when they were cutting, how you can hear. No,
that still wasn't.
You're gonna cut me.
Okay. So
I'm like, nobody's gonna cut you.
Does he think that maybe when you cut his hair that it's like cutting skin?
I don't know. We tried in my head. So finally, after we're doing it, he still complains, but we get it done after wrist fighting, on the floor, on the table, on the chair, following the machine until we get it done.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh my goodness, is this ever going to improve?
Well, I would say that I'd love to, talk to you a little bit further about it, but I would say, probably fighting with him is probably not it's not fun for you, and it probably isn't, it's not gonna necessarily do what you need. But I do have, sometimes what you can do is that you can introduce stuff, and then slowly kind of build up a tolerance. And sometimes it takes a really long time for that to happen.
Okay.
But starting where he's at, if he would be willing to hold the clippers in his hand and listen to them, or the scissors in his hand. Obviously, you have to do that safely so he doesn't, stab himself.
We let him put him on his hand, and
Mhm.
so he's been doing a little better, but he still keeps moving his tail. I mean, his head he won't keep it together. It's like, and he says, "Stop, stop," and I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
Mhm.
Finally, I said, halfway done, that's the important thing. I said, just leave him alone, and then he gets happy.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like there's a little bit of desensitization and kind of building up some stamina that needs to happen. And for every kid, what that looks like is different.
Okay.
And you may actually, this may sound strange, but you may want to contact your local autism society, because a lot of them have lists of people who cut hair who are very familiar with this type of behavior.
Yeah, because I taken them to a couple of places that had referred me, and we stopped because of COVID. And then the lady who used to cut her hair since he was a baby, I mean, he started developing this when he was like 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was able to cut his hair until he's like 6. And she said, I can't do it anymore. He just moves his head too much. And he cries. So let's just stop. And I said, okay. Because it's like, when you force a child, you just can't do it. So then
Right,
we
exactly.
found another place somewhere on 123 that they cut kids for hair. Can't remember what the name is. So they cut the hair, and apparently that helps. And they say, let's do the scissors.
Mm-hmm.
The first day he behaved good, but then the second visit when we went on, it was the same way. So I don't know, like maybe paying attention. I don't know what it is, but it's just.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it would be helpful to have somebody. This is one of those situations where it would be really helpful to have somebody taking a second set of eyes and looking,
Yeah.
who really understands, how to desensitize kids to things that they have to do, but they don't necessarily like to do.
I know.
So my son actually has the same exact problem. We can't cut his hair. Cutting his nails is like, oh my God, I really have to chase him around the house. And I really just chalked this up to a sensory issue, and maybe I shouldn't have done that, but we do try to distract him a lot. Like we'll give him an iPad while I'm cutting his hair, and I know it's a mess and we have to deal with that, but it helps a little. But he's been like the previous speaker before. I mean, it's like since he was a baby, he's had issues with this. So, and brushing his teeth, those kind of little things, those are still, and he's 10 now. So it's like I'm still doing the same kind of thing as distracting him. But you're saying that there's actually a way to look into this and desensitize him to this? Or is it maybe something that is just a sensory issue?
Well, with sensory issues, it doesn't. It like all hope is not lost with sensory issues. So, have you talked to an OT?
No, not about these.
So, yeah. So you might want to talk to an OT about some desensitization procedures. But yeah, they're working with, if it's sensory, working with an OT and a BCBA together. You can really kind of get over those humps. It's not like, oh, well, it's sensory, so, we can't do anything about it.
Got it.
There are things you can do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, I will stay here for as long as anybody who wants to ask questions or has concerns or whatever. But I really thank you all for your time. Unfortunately, I didn't get to thank about half of the room. And I appreciate your questions and the conversation. And these are always fun. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. And I will reach out to you via email. I just want to talk to my husband and put the things down, and maybe we can, I don't know, have a talk later on.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here.
Okay. Thank you so much, Christine.
Sure.
Okay.
Stacy, I wanted to remind you, don't forget to turn off the recording.